All right, I am going to get started. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My name is Sister Nada Midday and I am the Kennedy Regional Lead for Muhsen. So happy for all of you to be partaking in this important session today. Mashallah, Sister Amber Rehman is someone that I revere and look up to dearly. She has, mashallah, many accomplishments and probably the best person to be speaking on this topic. Sister Amber is a program manager for Stop Hate AB's active bystander training and founder of SAFE Strategies for Advocacy, Freedom, and Empowerment, and Government Relations, and an outreach coordinator at Ruh Disability Awareness Advocate, and currently doing her master's in psychology. Mashallah, she has reached so many accomplishments. We're very proud of her, and I'm excited for all of you. Whether you do have a disability, you work in the disability landscape, or you have a loved one, or you're a caregiver of someone with a disability, I think that this presentation will be extremely beneficial. So without further ado, Sister Amber.
All right, Jazakumullah khair, Nada. I really appreciate that. So, our topic today is navigating disability and the challenges of mental health and seeking support and overall getting spiritual empowerment. And we're here to basically first start with mentioning that this is a safe, compassionate space. We're exploring disability, mental health, and faith. We will normalize discussions around challenges because that's one of the hardest pieces and share some practical tools, but also recognize that there isn't everything available to us all at one time. So if anybody has any information on anything additional that I do not mention, you're free to mention that afterwards. So I can get started, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, as Another mentioned, I am the Government Relations and Partnership Coordinator at RUH. I'm an anti-discrimination advocate, and I really focus on developing programming and curriculum around fighting discrimination. And I was doing so many trainings and workshops that I decided to launch my own nonprofit, which is Strategies for Advocacy, Freedom, and Empowerment. Now, when we talk about disability, it's very important for us to recognize that disability. First of all, I'm going to put it out there that I actually make my slides with a lot of words because some people prefer reading the content, while others are more about more audio inclined. So whatever I say most likely will be already on the screen, so that makes it accessible for everyone. If you are just looking to hear, you can close your eyes and you don't have to pay attention to the details on the screen. But I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that. So if it's visually a little, much, please forgive me, and it's by design. So what is a disability? So understanding the complete picture requires that we acknowledge that there is physical disabilities and visible disabilities that include mobility challenges, uh, deafness, blindness, and other physically apparent ones. And then there's many hidden ones. And according to Statistics Canada, the number of hidden disabilities that are rising are actually becoming quite of concern, because that means that we have to move at a faster rate to accommodate all the various disabilities that are emerging. Then there is developmental, for example, autism or Down syndrome and other learning challenges that exist. But that doesn't mean that disability is just a diagnosis. Disability is much more than that. It's got perspectives on its perspective influences all of our life, and we have to make sure we understand that models of understanding disability require that there's a medical aspect of disability where we're trying to fix something, and that's how the healthcare system has positioned it, and we're grateful for it. For those of us who are dealing with a disability, there are challenges and we want support. So in that sense, it is very powerful for us to understand that disability is something that could be medically supported, right? Which focuses on, some sort of diagnosis, then following up with treatment that can allow for people to live what would be called a normalized way of existing. Normalization is a very uh, difficult term to deal with because normal is subjective, and what is normal for one person may not be normal for another person. And it really, really, that normalization part actually burdens the individual with a disability. Then, as a social model, we have to understand that disability is much more than that. We are dealing with a construct because recognizing that society is what's creating disability barriers is very, very important. So, this means that addressing inaccessibility in our environment is essential. That means addressing challenges of stigma and prejudice is very important. Promoting inclusive spaces that create an understanding, empathy, and some sort of communication beyond just, we've created this inclusive little bubble and that's it, that's where you can operate, is something that we would like to pay attention to. And many navigate these realities without getting the support that they need. Sometimes we encounter difficulties just by day-to-day navigation, which can be exhausting. Um, before I jump into my own personal story a little bit, I wanted to talk about the intersectionality of disability. The intersectionality of disability is a very, very, very big one. And that means that essentially, when we are experiencing some form of disability or ability challenges or accessibility issues or some sort of ableism, there are many other factors that come into play. One's race and ethnicity can have an impact on one's disability because racialized individuals are then at the mercy of a system that might target them in more than one way. So it could be that you're experiencing marginalization already because of your disability, but you could also additionally be experiencing marginalization because of your race or your gender or something else. Economic status. Sometimes poverty limitations do not allow us to access resources. Many people who are accessing resources can easily convey that sometimes the system only supports people who are either supported by the government or have some sort of financial freedom to be able to access accommodations, tools, equipment. All of those things are sometimes difficult to access just because of economic status. Community stigma is part of our intersectional identity. That means that we are constantly struggling with things like a community that doesn't understand what we need, a community that doesn't understand that small statements that are microaggressions, they can impact our personal being. They can also, community stigma can also cause many challenges with an individual not being able to access support. So it creates silos in which people are excluded from being part of the larger community. There are many people who actually cannot get support for their disability simply because of their immigration status. I know this personally. I was in limbo for immigration because of my disability for over 30 years in Canada. I've been in Canada for 40 some odd years, or almost 40 years, but in that 40 years, I've only been a Canadian since the pandemic. So that just explains that, there were times when I couldn't access certain things simply because my immigration status informed how the intersectionality of my disability was experienced. So these intersecting identities amplify many barriers and create a lot of isolation for individuals. And that means that there has to be a lot more attention paid to how support is provided. So I will jump into a little bit of my personal story here because I think it's important that I share that with you. Um, More specifically, I will go into my journey, my education journey. I can go into any part of my life, and it would be a chapter, and I am sure those of you who are here can agree to that with your own lives as well. But essentially, when I look at my life, I see there are challenges I've had, and then Allah slowly helps me unpack each and every challenge. And then from that challenge, I get the support I need. Sometimes it takes years, it takes self-advocacy, it takes persistence. But by the end, alhamdulillah, I can look back and say, Allah was with me the entire time. And alhamdulillah, that is a promise from Allah that if we call on Him, He's near. So I will start with my educational journey. I was 5 years old in Pakistan. I had already contracted polio at the age of close to 1 years old. I could not navigate in Pakistan with my disability. There wasn't enough awareness about how to assist somebody with polio. So I couldn't walk. And because we weren't, I guess, properly assisted, I didn't have a wheelchair either. So, my parents used to carry me around everywhere. At home, I used to, you know, basically, move around, freely, but outside of my home, I could not move around. So that meant that early on at 5 years old, what do you really care about? You care about play, you care about friends, you care about school. And my obsession with school began at that time. So I was 5 years old and I really wanted to go to school with my brothers. um, it didn't happen. My parents had tutors for me at home. And through that, I achieved, an incredible grasp on education in that short, few months or years. In Pakistan, we have an obsession with education at an early age. So, between 3 and 5, you actually start engaging with how to do your multiplications and all those type of things. So by kindergarten, essentially, I knew, my multiplications up to 5. So you can see I was a very driven student. And my parents even tried taking me to schools to find out if they had some sort of accommodations to let me be able to go to school. So that was my journey in Pakistan. I came to Canada at the age of 7. I came here for treatment at the Shriners Hospital, and within a week of arriving in Canada, I was able to walk. Surgeries that were corrective were able to give me the ability to walk. Within 6 months of being in Canada, I was in a school. Um, I was delayed, obviously, because of how my life went. But by by grade 2, I was a 9-year-old who was enjoying her education, and the freedom school gave me, making friends and all those type of things. It obviously came with challenges. There was bullying, there was, being sidelined, but the opportunities for education made me so thrilled. Um, from there, I went through elementary school with the support of incredible staff, accommodations of all kinds. Um, and a whole lot of support that really empowered me to really, really love, the way my mind was expanding. I went to high school and elementary school and high school, and had multiple surgeries in those years and had incredible support from teachers and staff. My immigration status started hindering my access to college and university. But what was worse than the immigration status, because I could have paid international fees to access education if I really, really wanted, was the barrier of accessibility. There aren't colleges and universities that are accessible. Um, to go to a university or a college in, say, Montreal or over here in Calgary meant that you're navigating huge campuses where certain areas are not accessible. And that was such a difficult challenge for me that I was like, do I even want to pay international fees for an education that will be difficult for me to get because I can't get around, nor can my safety be guaranteed in this educational environment? That became such a big challenge for me that I actually stopped going to university, or I actually did not go beyond first year of college in Montreal. That's grade 12, because it just became compounding factors that would not allow me to get my education. I spent about 20 years like that, or 15 years. At the age of 35, my husband was really, really supportive and decided that I need to go to school. And if it means that he goes to school with me, then that would be the way I would be able to navigate um, the physical barriers that I experienced. So I did my first um, PR certification from McGill with the support of my husband being a co-student with me. I came moved to Alberta at that point, and after that, I thought about it. I think I need to go back to school. I think I need to do this. And it took me about 5 years to think it through. At the age of 40, I decided I think it's time for me to go back to school. And I had to do a whole bunch of upgrading because of the challenges I had had earlier. And I did all of that with my son. So my son then became the person who went with me to school, and he and I both actually just completed our degree. I was a year ahead of him, and he was a year behind me this past, and he graduated this year, and I graduated last year. So just telling you that compounding um, factors that affect an individual when I speak about intersectionality is a very serious thing. So that means that I had allies along the way that helped me get to where I am. I'm currently doing my master's. I graduated in my psychology degree, and now I'm doing my master's in psychology, and hopefully I will be able to do a PhD. Um, those things are incredible achievements for me because I really had to constantly educate myself and stay on track to make myself feel like I was still part of a system. So that was very difficult, but I had allies. Now, just to level set, I always like to mention while I assisted my family in getting access, oh, sorry, while my family assisted me through my access of education, I helped them. My husband struggled with ADHD all his life and had difficulty focusing in on school. I was able to help him focus on school. My son experienced many, many things, including ADHD, bullying, all kinds of things that students experience that they don't get support for. And I was able to help him with being a really, really effective student. And so basically, our journey was in tandem. So he supported me by making sure that I was able to go to my university physically, and I made sure I assisted him in getting the support he needed for all of his tools and engagement when it came to school. So, when I talk about intersectionality, this is where we talk about how all of the various ways we are affected by disability. Now, while my disability is so apparent, I walk with crutches. I have, times where I'm in a wheelchair. Um, my son's uh, challenges were different. They were more hidden and more he was more inclined to be embarrassed about what he was experiencing and not asking for support. The way I helped him was I learned how to ask for help. I learned that there's this accommodation department in a school. I learned that anytime you ask a professor for help, they're required to help you, and they're in fact thrilled to help you. So we went through this journey together, just simply learning to ask for help together and then coming out successful at the end because we learned that self-advocacy was the way to success. And that is one of the biggest piece I can say about intersectionality. Intersectionality means that our various identities need different types of support. And what that means is that when we ask for support, we can actually put it out that there are barriers, and those barriers need addressing. The barriers need systems change. The barriers need all kinds of assessments, right? And when we ask for help, we're actually helping others help others, not just helping us, helping others. And that's where it's vitally important. All right. So we went into the whole journey of myself accessing education, and alhamdulillah, it has been a successful journey. The other piece that's been very important to me throughout my entire life is how Islam views disability. Now, we come from various cultural backgrounds where stigma is very much part of our environment. Stigma is part of our community dialogue. It offers a lot of problems to the disability community, or communities facing disability, because it's viewed either as a punishment or it's viewed as something that cannot be overcome. And Islam is full of people and people and stories of individuals who overcame many things. And Islam was founded on people who were actually struggling, right? So that's why the young people, women, people who were, in poverty, turned to Islam because Allah was there for them, right? And they started seeing that. So the Quran and Sunnah teaches us that disability is not a punishment. It is a path which will bring us closer to Allah. And because of that, everyone deserves access to knowledge and community, and most importantly, dignity. And that means that sometimes when we're talking to someone and they are talking down to us, that isn't a respectful and Islamic way. And it's okay to sometimes say that something is not Islamic. When someone is behaving in a way that hurts us or hurts persons with disabilities or persons with different challenges, and I'm putting this in the scope of disability, but this can be applied to any sort of discrimination that one can experience. Um, Offering dignity to our community members is essential, because at the end of the day, we are judged by our hearts and our intentions, and our work is also not about the outcome, it's about the effort, right? So our bodies can be judged by others, or our physicality or our presence can be judged by others, but really our connection is with Allah. So it's okay to sometimes say that I'm sorry, what was said here was not acceptable. So accommodating others in their form of worship is a blessing and not a burden. And that's one thing I really wanted to highlight. The more we accommodate people with disabilities, the more we are likely to see that there is people entering the masajids, and people are embracing Islam, and people are engaging with the Muslim community. So, in that vein, I'd like to talk about one of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If anyone remembers, Surah Abasa is a beautiful surah which starts with a story about a man coming to the Prophet, a blind man coming to the Prophet, and interrupting him while he was speaking to the leaders of the Quraysh. And while the Prophet ﷺ is infallible, and Allah has made sure that, whatever he does is, something that we can turn to as hikmah, um, Allah chastised the Prophet in Surah Abasa. He got upset over the fact that he turned away um, a blind person. Now, this is so powerful because that person had an honored position in the eyes of Allah, right? That person was a challenge to what we call inclusion. that person was a challenge to what Allah has allowed for us to see as pure accessibility directly to Allah. We do not have an intermediary between us and Allah. And the man had asked the Prophet ﷺ something related to the Quran. He went on. So this incident is when what everybody knows about that, the Prophet ﷺ was interrupted and he got upset or he frowned, and he turned away. And that was a question to the Prophet. Did you think that he was not purified, right? Or that he came with a pure heart? Now, imagine that that was the man that, Allah honored by mentioning him in the Quran. Additionally, after that, um, his name was Ibn Maktoum. And Ibn Maktoum was somebody who became an honored individual. When the Prophet ﷺ would call for people to support the community while he was away on different expeditions or different community things, he left Ibn Maktoum to lead Salah, and also in his presence when the companions, that were we know Bilal ibn Rabah was the companion that did the adhan. So in Ramadan, he would be the one who Bilal radiallahu anhu was the muadhin for the beginning of the of suhoor, and Ibn Maktoum was the one who would call the adhan for people to stop eating right before suhoor. Just to tell you the importance of this person. Um, this was not the only revelation that was related to Ibn Maktoum. The other one was when the Prophet ﷺ received revelation regarding going to fight for the fi sabilillah. Um, the stipulation around whether or not um, someone who's not in the condition to go and serve fi sabilillah, they would be able to stay back due to their condition. And that was very specifically because Ibn Maktoum was somebody who was very concerned about this. So this story essentially highlights that in Islam, all seekers of knowledge are blessed and honored, and all seekers of knowledge deserve equality and equal treatment in accessing, and that has accessing knowledge and accessing community and accessing resources within our community is not an exclusive thing. It is something that we should be supporting throughout all of our lives. So we know for a fact that there are, disability services everywhere, right? We can access healthcare, support. That means housing assistance, transportation. The government supports in quite a lot of initiatives, and we kind of disconnect from it at that point. That becomes somebody else's responsibility, right? The government is responsible for taking care of persons with disabilities. But all the compounding things that we experience lead to many, many challenges that are outside of those supports. And that sometimes lead to mental health support requirements. So then there's a requirement for both secular and faith-based counseling. And in this, I will mention some of the beautiful access available through Ruh. So Ruh has provided assistance for people with mental health challenges or who are seeking talk therapy through their program, which allows people to remove all barriers. If you've come from various language backgrounds, if you come from various cultural background, most importantly, if you come from an Islamic background and you would want something that's Islamically aligned, Ruh is able to support you through that. Then there's Islamic organizations like Muhsen and others that offer specialized programs that support prayer accommodations in different masajids. And Muhsen is beautiful because Muhsen allows for people or masajids to get certified, right? So you can have an invitation from an organization basically that allows Muhsin to come in and assess their overall needs. So let's talk a little bit more about the mental health challenges, right? So we went a little bit here about the types of supports that are needed. What are the challenges, the mental health challenges of persons with disabilities and persons who are pe supporting people with disabilities? So one of the direct impacts of persons for persons with disabilities is not just their disability or a lack of accessibility. It's the chronic burden of that disability, the chronic fatigue that rises from such a situation, right? There could be things like medication side effects. There could be sleep disruption and physical limitations, right? All of those things have direct impact on our physical well-being as well as our psychological well-being. The social impacts are a little bit more intense because when a person has a disability and they've been isolated, they are likely to feel a lot more of the things that would make them feel worse. So depression, anxiety, PTSD that's related to different types of events can create isolation and exclusion for persons with disabilities. Next thing is stigma and microaggressions. The power of language is very, very important to recognize here. When we speak to a person with a disability, it's very important to see how we can support them without targeting them. When I first had my children, one of the first things I would get asked by Muslims, and I say Muslims because it was mostly Muslims that I would hear it from, how are you going to take care of your kids? And that was devastating for me because I had put in all the supports that I needed to be able to to be able to raise my children. And also, I also had this strong belief that if Allah gave me something, Allah will take care of me. And hearing that from a Muslim, that they should be aware of the fact that Allah takes care of everything, and then they're still asking me who's going to take care of this or who's going to take care of you, that was one of the hardest things to deal with. I'm sure I can come up with a list of stigma and microaggressions that we deal with, but that would be a completely separate discussion. But I really want to highlight that stigma and microaggressions and macroaggressions will lead to very serious cases of isolation and exclusion. These things, like stigma and microaggressions, can also lead to employment barriers. I have worked with a range of Muslim organizations in my lifetime, and I've heard some very, very devastating things, like, I don't think you can do this, or I don't think you can, be present at something, even though I have not stipulated um, whether or not I can be engaged with something. The financial strain of disability is another one. So disability is multi um, faceted in that sense, where so many parts of your life are impacted that people sometimes need to create an empathetic environment for people to be able to ask for help. So that means it's okay to say this is hard, and that's not weakness. This is really asking for help actually increases our capacity. These challenges affect not just individuals, but entire families and their support systems. So that means sometimes our challenge is that we think that a person who's experiencing disability and the social impacts, those social impacts affect others as well. I will give you an example for myself. For example, in winter, I have a very difficult time going to the masajids to pray. Because my family does not want to leave me alone, one person will have to stay behind so that I'm not alone while they go to the masjids. And that is something, if there was more accommodation, more accessibility taken into consideration, perhaps our whole family network would not be so deeply affected by the impacts of disability in my family. So sometimes this stuff can become very overwhelming. Um, while we list all of these things, it's very important for us to understand that there is nothing bigger than self-advocacy. And self-advocacy can sometimes be very, very heavy. And recognizing the heaviness of self-advocacy is okay. And then learning practical tools that can support us is very powerful. Some practical tools that have been helpful for me and helpful in the sense that I'm constantly learning how to do these things more. Doesn't mean that I apply all of these things, nor does it mean that all of these things come to mind when I'm having one of those moments where I just cannot cope. But it's good to have them readily available. Things like breath work through mindfulness, having body scans and talking to yourself about, okay, I'm experiencing something and it's okay to experience that. Language around mindfulness is essentially really empowers us to check in with our own body. Sometimes we need to just anchor with dhikr and saying tasbih and asking Allah for help and watch the pressure lift from our own shoulders and being shared by our faith and our entire existence. I have found routine and structured but flexible daily rhythms also are excellent in being tools that reduce decision fatigue as well as the predictability makes it easier to do things. So that means if I need to wake up first thing in the morning and have my cup of tea and recenter myself, have those mindful moments, I'm able to focus a little bit more. And in that sense, it can also go further. Journaling, for example, is a great tool. Journaling can happen in any form now. I recognize very much not everybody's a writer. Sometimes we're just talkers and we need to speak to someone or something. So recording voice notes is one of the simplest ways I've found that journaling actually creates a diary where you can actually let go of the things that are bothering you and process the emotions and then find balance and recenter. Another way is through creative expression. Using art, poetry, telling storytelling is very powerful. The times where I was not in school, the times when I was not, able to get into some sort of program or something like that, I did a lot of writing. I became a blogger for Huffington Post and other outlets because I just needed to be engaged. So that internal pain was constantly being processed, but also I got to do my advocacy work through that. So essentially, what we need to recognize healing is a process, and it doesn't mean pain disappears. These are just tools to help us manage the burden as well as carry it with dignity. So, when we talk about masjids and we talk about environments where Muslims can support the hardship that comes with disability, and it's okay to call it a hardship. I know a lot of people um, like to call us champions. A lot of advocacy groups, like to focus on the strength, but in strength is weakness, and in weakness is recognizing that you need support, and in support we can become strong again, and that strength is what makes us resilient as people and as individuals and as Muslims. Um, so creating inclusive spaces is definitely at the center of this. There are barriers that need to be removed. That means physical access is very, very important. The amount of masajids that I have been to where I can't access the space is really troubling for me as an individual, but it actually devastates my kids more than it devastates me because they see all the times that I could go to a masjid and I end up at the front door and I look around and there's no way of getting up the stairs, or there's no way, or if there is a way, it's slippery, or if it's not slippery, then the top floor for the women is several floors up, or it could be anything. Or when I get upstairs to the prayer room, there's not a chair in sight for me to sit on. These are all challenges. Communication is an essential one as well. Communication access for persons with different challenges, auditory challenges, visual challenges, is very important because we need to recognize that our spaces need to be able to fulfill the needs of all kinds of disabilities. Considering also sensory requirements of people. Recognizing our communities aren't always fully informed about how to engage with persons that have different challenges. Having quiet rooms with reduced stimulation areas could have major impact on individuals who are seeking support. Having sensory kits are actually one of the ways we have been able to recognize that parents who are caregivers can actually extend their time at the massages as well. Now, when we talk about caregivers, I think it's very important to recognize that there is a biopsychosocial impact of being a caregiver. So that means that there are daily times, daily hours in the day where an individual can experience all kinds of things, but they cannot do anything about it because their hours in providing direct care are on top of all the other responsibilities they have to fulfill. They experience depression. They experience all kinds of challenges, but because they're serving or supporting a person with a disability, that can be overwhelming. And I have to speak from this from my own family. I see that my family does everything possible to support everything I do. So that means if I decided I want to climb Mount Everest, they will assist me through it. And that means their biopsychosocial battery will have been affected by what my goals were. And that's what it is for someone like me where I can express myself. Now imagine someone who's experiencing take being a caregiver for someone who's not able to communicate orally. The social isolation one feels when one is not supported. Most caregivers are often disconnected from family, friends, and even community support. So, in this aspect, we need to support the biopsychosocial aspects of a caregiver's life. And for caregivers, some of the strategies that we can apply, or we can ask them and our those around us that are actually supporting other caregivers. So if you're not a caregiver yourself, but you're supporting someone who's a caregiver, then help them navigate some of these strategies. These are also great tips for someone who is actually experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety from their duties day in and day out. Taking micro breaks, right? Finding 5 to 10 minutes of solitude can reset the nervous system. Stepping outside, having meaningful interactions within oneself and others that can create micro breaks. Accepting help, asking communities and loved ones that, I'm having a challenging time right now. I need support. I need help. I need help with meal prep. I need help with running errands. Are you able to babysit for me so that I can get the support I need so I can be able to do groceries, but also maybe get a break. Recognizing that we need to create peer support groups is very important. Recognizing that online groups can also sometimes supplement for community groups is very powerful as well when in-person things are not possible. And then one of the biggest things for caregivers, as well as for persons with disabilities, is that Allah does not place a burden on a soul greater than what it can bear. And that is very, very important because at the end of the day, when the challenges become too heavy and we have that moment where we break and we say, why me? Then there is this to support us. And that is all we need sometimes to reset. I actually have seen some disability advocates focus on the why me question and reframe it as why not me? And that means that we accept, we are humbled by the experience, that Allah has chosen me for this challenge. So the next thing we'll talk about is being an effective ally. So I spoke about my personal journey. I spoke about organizations that support. I spoke about caregivers. Now, what about the rest of us? Right? Those are not those that don't fall in the four categories. Um, what can they do? They can be allies. They can help carry the burden. That means including disabled Muslims in leadership roles or effective roles that help make decisions when it comes to not just their needs, but overall, because you will find in a person with a disability someone who's already engaged in the empathetic process. Using inclusive language. Avoid pity-based conversations. This happens a lot when we say, "Poor you," or "Can I help you through this?" Um, Although those seem like very nice things to say, sometimes when a person is struggling and they want to do something on their own, just saying, "Can I help you through this?" might not be the right thing to do. Sometimes creating uh, an environment of dignity and focusing on respect, one can create inclusive language and have a dialogue in which a person feels safe enough to ask for what they need. Creating access is very important. I actually absolutely love how Muhsen has across Canada created safe spaces in which people can access events and talks and salahs through multiple accommodations. One of my biggest challenges is in an environment, a conference environment, where if I want to, see, a speaker, I cannot clamor to the front. So having, created spaces that highlight, okay, this is for persons with special needs or persons with disabilities, then it makes a big difference. Asking and not assuming is a big one, right? Learning about different individuals' needs is very important. While people can, assume that something, because I am physically challenged, I would want something that's very, very related to my physicality is not necessarily the truth. Sometimes I just want some sort of emotional uplifting or some sort of support for what I'm going through that's not related directly to my disability. So assuming that only my disability is my focus is something that, I hope that people don't do. And that means that we have to recognize that being Muslim means we don't just tolerate difference, we honor them because they are by Allah's mercy. I think when I speak about empowerment, I have walked you through my educational journey, but spiritual empowerment is right up there. Islam teaches us that hardship is not a punishment. It's an opportunity for spiritual growth. It's an opportunity to have a different lens than everybody else. And it's almost a gift in seeing the world through Allah's various ways He's created us. So, when we're talking about spiritual empowerment, there is obviously the baseline where we're meeting basic needs and managing day-to-day challenges with the available resources that we have. Oftentimes, those surviving mechanisms are not even Islamically focused. Then there's coping, developing strategies to reduce stress and building resilience in our communities, and then creating some sort of practice around that. But we want to be at a place where we're thriving, we're finding meaning and purpose and joy despite the challenges. That means, as a collective community, we're creating an identity for persons with disabilities that can empower their faith to grow further and further. And so that spiritual empowerment can go from surviving to coping to thriving. And that has everything to do with perspective and nothing to do with the challenges we're experiencing. And Allah has promised us with our hardship comes ease. So I mentioned the burden of feeling like a person with a disability can have many challenges. beyond the disability, isolation and exclusion. You can find lots of community events and not feel included. You can find many support tools, but still not feel like they are for you. You can feel a permanent low level hum of emotions that no one can help you overcome. So, mental health resources really make a difference, in my opinion, and in my lived experience. I am very blessed. I have um, a family, a husband, and kids who really, really focus on my mental health, and I focus on theirs. So, it's an interactive experience for us. But we have really recognized that faith-aligned care is important, and Ruh is an organization that's doing exactly that. And I'm really proud to support the initiative that they have started in trying to remove all kinds of barriers. That means faith-based barriers have been challenged by providing Islamically centered mental health care with therapists that are within the fold of Islam, as well as, exercising uh, Islamic knowledge within the framework of as certified therapists. They support through multiple languages, so 17 different languages, including American Sign Language. They try to make their access financially and accessibility friendly, and making sure that everything is culturally aware. So that is one of the resources that I really recommend if people were to use. It would be beneficial. And then getting support from an organization like Mohsen. Mohsen is doing incredible work internationally. They're providing Umrah support, but before you even get to Umrah, there's family care. Recognizing that respite care from family for caregivers is essential in providing support for the disability community. Special needs families require events. They need connections, and Mohsen is able to provide that across the globe in different formats with different partnerships with organizations. So sometimes you'll be at an event and there will be respite from Mohsen, which allows a parent to actually enjoy a program, or a person with a disability to be able to enjoy something. Spiritual access is actually very, very important. Religious school accommodations for all kinds of learning challenges, right? So, for example, Braille Qurans, or some sort of assisted learning when it comes to our deen is very, very important. Assisted Umrah journeys are the ones that touch my heart the most, because one of the hardest things I ever imagined was getting to Umrah. Community building, masjid certification is actually essential. That means, if I start seeing signs, inshallah, in the future where I see a Muhsen symbol on the door of the masjid, I will know that I will not have to go in that masjid and fight for my rights. They will have certain things already in place. So these are all very powerful things, but I think awareness is one of the biggest things. So Mohsen has been supporting awareness in khutbas and educating the wider community, and I think that's extremely powerful, because at the end of the day, if we do not have that connection with our community and our imams, and the education does not start from our people of knowledge, then the participation from our community will not be as involved. So these services are very valuable, and they're essential for support. So my final reflection here today is, whether you are living with a disability or caring for someone who is, you have to be able to learn that you are part of the conversation. Disability is human diversity. Allah has made us into nations and tribes, so we may know one another. It is not a flaw. It is not a punishment. It is intentional. It is a creation of Allah. So just like we appreciate the flowers, we have to appreciate ourselves. Seeking help. Seeking help is the hardest thing to do, but once you get in the practice of it, it becomes such a superpower. And in fact, people appreciate, organizations appreciate, individuals appreciate when you seek help from your own self, and then it's a little less daunting for others when they're trying to support us. And then recognizing whoever is here, you are here because your efforts are going to impact others. And Allah is your witness, and He honors you, and He will preserve your effort. So I appreciate everyone that has been part of this journey. And I think we can open this now to questions.
Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much. Jazakallahu khairan. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was incredibly impactful. You touched on so many important topics, and I think now what we'll do is we'll have a little bit of an open dialogue. So before we sent out a questionnaire to all the participants, which we do have some questions, but I do want to read some that are in the chat. First, from the sister, any advice when the school system didn't work for my son despite advocacy? After switching schools 5 times, I pulled him out to homeschool. Now he doesn't want to go to high school because of past negative experience and his inability to navigate by himself. This is a big one. A lot of parents and caregivers really struggle with school placement and advocacy for their children. So what advice can you give us?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because my son, who is in his early 20s, had a terrible time, and he didn't have anything really, glaring as a disability. But he had a terrible time in junior high, elementary, even high school, and it took us a lot to get him to university. He is now, in a school, because now he's going to be engaging as a future teacher because now he wants to be a teacher. It's funny how that all came around. Um, and he cannot help the feelings that he had when he was going through the struggles of being in that environment where he was made to feel like he didn't belong. I know patience is not one of the things that we want to hear about, but patience does pay off. It's a long journey, um, and sometimes the advocacy, even if it doesn't look like it's working right now, it will work because it's going to, Allah sees our struggle and the doors do open eventually. Now, when we're struggling though, um, saying that Allah has a way out for you eventually doesn't seem like right now, and that's very, very burdensome. So, what I generally advise when it comes to this is keep trying within the area that you are able to work and seeking support from various organizations. There are a lot of different organizations in Canada or Canada and the United States that support disability, inclusion and things like that. But also, I think it's important to be merciful to ourselves. That there's only so much trying we can do. That sometimes it's okay to just say Alhamdulillah. I will keep working at this as best as I can, and Allah will show me something that will help me through my difficulties, and I will continue to do those things. The other thing is getting some community support or getting support from counselors or getting support from other organizations because sometimes the hardest thing is carrying that burden of what you have to do alone. And that aloneness, or that isolating journey can make it very difficult for people to seek the help and support that they need. Sometimes the biggest barrier to accessing certain things or tools is just the fact that you're exhausted. So I think that's how I would navigate that. Nada, would you like to add something more to that?
No, I think, mashallah, you touched on everything. That was really great. So this question I love from Brother Yusuf. How did you support your husband and son with their ADHD? We have a lot of self-awareness and acknowledgement now around ADHD. we've changed the narrative around seeking, help, recognizing it, acknowledging it. And unfortunately, our school systems and our places of work are not always equipped to support ADHD. So how did you support your son and your husband?
That is a great question. The first step was recognizing they don't learn the same way other people do. I think my first test subject, because I now treat everybody as a test subject, is was you know he was able to show me that he could not pay attention to things. Um, we had to really use things like entertainment in the middle of things to make things fun. So, for example, if we went to school, we would make sure we went for coffee before or something like that. Some sort of incentive. Incentives have a way of working in very interesting ways. Watching a episode of something that, okay, if we watch an episode of something, we are going to be able to do the next task, right? And I'm one of those really structured people. I actually don't miss deadlines. I do not, I have a lot going on all at the same time. I really like to make sure, I'm an anxiety driven person because I have a lot on my plate. And also, I always have imposter syndrome because as a person with a disability, you're constantly thinking about not being good enough. So I've actually had to help them reel in also their anxiety by recognizing it's okay if you can't do certain things. It's okay to recognize that you might do some things later, but you have to commit to yourself that you're going to do it. Because once you commit to yourself, then that commitment goes a lot further for you than it does for anybody else. And then I also, I think, was able to help them navigate that it may seem like they're doing things for me because I'm asking them to do it, but I remind them that this is only for yourself. I'm here just as your champion, right? So I actually got to be the caseworker for my husband and my son. And my son was, he said he hated, like actually he just graduated, and part of his graduation prank or whatever that he pulled was we went to a small Catholic university that was really accessible for me. He actually pulled me onto my mom and myself onto the stage when he was accepting his degree because he said he couldn't have done it without me. And the reason why he couldn't have done it without me is because I really assisted him through, okay, let's sit down. And the let's sit down became everything. The let's sit down and tackle how to read a syllabus. Let's sit down. And it became a practice at the beginning of every semester. Okay, we're going to sit down. We're going to read the syllabus. We're going to sit down and we're going to register for your classes. We're going to sit down. We're going to look at what is your accommodation schedule like? Do you need a note taker? Do you need this? Do you need that? So it's just recognizing all the supports that they need. And I think that's how I think I've been able to give them the skills. And I'm my kids call me a little bit morbid because I always say you have to be able to figure this out if I die. So they are actually getting to that point where it's become their skills, right? So it's no longer I'm doing this. It's now they're like, I did this on my own. It's like, okay, alhamdulillah, it has worked.
Alhamdulillah. So from this brother, this recording will be this will be recorded. Yes, we will upload it to YouTube, inshallah. And then is there a way that we can email Sister Amber? So if you can share your Ruh email in the chat, and then um
I will share my uh
whichever email
yeah.
you okay, I need support navigating impending puberty for my daughter, and more programs regarding that. That's a good one for parents. Is there any resources or organizations that you can suggest?
So for this, I think it matters province to province.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to seek, if you need mental health support, I think there is definitely, some navigation there. Puberty is one of those really intense time periods in a person's life. Um, and sometimes we're too close to it. we can provide, them with the advice that we want, but there's so many, emotions to navigate, so many life changes to navigate, that becomes burdensome on parents. And I did not have this when my daughter was entering her teens. I wish I did. Ruh has certified therapists who are able to help with coming of age, discussions. But if it's somebody, a person with a disability, I would reach out to organizations like Muhsen and ask what are some of the tools that I can use to kind of inform and recognize, help the child recognize some of the challenges that they're going through. Is it something related to their disability, or is it something related to them fitting in and all those type of things, right? Because sometimes puberty challenges expose isolation and community, lack of support, right? So perhaps there is a need.
Last time we went this way وشفنا واحد البارك وقلت لي واو it's nice park. Let's see.
Thank you,
Sorry
Nana.
about that. Please proceed.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that I can recommend.
Okay, so
Nana, do you have any thing to add to that?
no, I think that this is definitely a gap within our community that we have to, support more parents in. And I think, inshallah, I will be discussing this with the Muhsin team on how we can, perhaps get some representatives from Ruh, perhaps some pediatricians to help us with this. But I keep hearing this as a reoccurring problem with parents. They need more help and assistance in this avenue. So inshallah, thank you for bringing it to our attention. And that's definitely something that we want to focus on supporting parents. Now, a lot of these questions that were submitted, Sister Amber did touch on. One that was probably my favorite is a lot of the times when I'm speaking to Muslims with disabilities, they mention like we are the forgotten Muslims. There's a sense of like resentment towards the Muslim community. And that's just, right? And that's valid for not having access to participation. So for those who have felt marginalized in the community, what advice would you have for healing and fostering a sense of optimism and inclusivity?
Um, so I think inclusivity is a funny term,
Mhm.
because there's nothing more inclusive than our deen. Um, if we just look at our Jama'ah, our Jama'ah is so beautiful, that we have to gather with our community many times a day. And it doesn't say only you, or only this group, or only that group. It's our Jama'ah is there for everyone. So inclusivity means that we have to be able to recognize everyone from wherever they are. Um, we should provide the support based on an individual's needs, but at the same time, just leading with empathy, I think is sufficient. Because I mean, I could go into a masjid and say, I need, ASL support, I need ramps, and I need, I don't know, one other thing, uh, you know, um, something that gives me, subtitles or something like that. Um, Great. But what about all the other people, right, that are going through various challenges? Then I think we have to go into things through just simply with asking questions with, okay, we have a Jama'ah here. We can offer support to the Jama'ah by putting a ramp that will help the elderly. It will help, the mothers who are bringing in the strollers, the parents who are, are struggling with, children at their terrible twos can benefit from, a quiet space or some sort of reflective space. All of these things are important. So when we talk about inclusivity in organizations, even, that means that we have to just start considering that we should help people from where they are rather than trying to create something. Because you can say, I only have one participant who's going to the masjid who has a wheelchair. So why do I need to make a ramp for that one person? But no, the strollers can go on it. The elderlies can go on it. Everybody can use it. So inclusivity actually opens doors for many people. So that conversation has to become more nuanced and more focused on just always being open to receive feedback and implement small changes because not everything is about a $10,000 ramp, right? So what can we do in tandem with providing those structures and creating inclusive spaces by creating other things that make people feel inclusive?
That was beautiful. All right, so last question. What opportunities exist for Muslims with disabilities to engage with non-for-profit organizations, and how can they ensure that their voices are heard effectively?
So that's a very funny one to me because I feel like I've forced myself onto nonprofits and forced myself into organizations where I've said, hey, you need me. Um, And I think that goes back into self-advocacy, but also recognizing that you're needed. So every organization has some sort of DEI requirement. So even if DEI is being, ousted and all this other stuff, they're still required to act within a certain framework, which is required to support individuals from diverse backgrounds. Use that diversity, right? I really believe that I offer organizations more in the way of empathy, creating systems that support many, many different types of individuals, and my willingness to learn. So sometimes, I'll go into an environment and I'm not necessarily the right person for an organization. But I'll say, I am very, very much willing to learn about what your needs are and how that can happen. Can I name organizations in Toronto? I mean, a lot of the charities that are out there are looking for, persons with disabilities. United Way is one of those incredible organizations that funds different groups, and they have all kinds of staff which they support. Foundations, like for example, in Calgary, we have Calgary Foundation. In Toronto, there's Toronto Foundation. Winnipeg Foundation is one of those incredible organizations that supports Muslims through funding. So these are, just I'll give you a tip actually. If you have a question and you don't know how to answer it, put it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a free tool and just ask it, what are some organizations that would want support from a person who is has diverse needs, and how can they support those organizations? And then I have no problem, encountering these people at networking events and positioning myself as you need me. Right. And it works. It takes some convincing, it takes some time. It takes some, I mean, you have to have a little bit of a thick skin and accept some disappointment. Um, but you can push forward and keep doing that until you develop your muscle of just asking, right? Just ask. So my two mottos are just ask. That means that's one of the tools I've taught my son more than my husband. But the tool that I've taught my husband to help him manage his ADHD and everything, because he used to say no to everything because he found everything overwhelming. I told him, let's just start saying yes. And when you start saying yes, the doors open because Allah is putting things in your way. Um, and the more we say yes, we don't have to necessarily follow through with everything. We just have to reflect on what our life could be if we did something. I don't know if that answers that question. I wouldn't. Every individual is different, and how they approach things is different. But I think that's one of the ways I've really found things to be helpful in that sense.
Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to open doors for you and your family. Allahumma ameen. Again, this was a beautiful talk that reflected on so many beautiful points. And I just want to, express to everyone how amazing Ruh is. It is an amazing organization that is doing groundbreaking work, and especially in the mental health landscape, in the fold of Islam, and, follow them, support them, and really just Jazakallahu khairan for all your help and support. Any closing comments, Sister Amber?
Yeah, Nada, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to speak here. This is, sometimes it's difficult to speak about these topics because, especially in the Muslim community, there isn't necessarily an audience for this type of information, but I think we're becoming more aware of how to support each other. And so, centering a voice of someone with a lived experience is very appreciated. And absolutely, the work organizations like Muhsen is doing and the work of organizations like Ruh really has a lot of power because both the organizations are actually responding to a crisis of isolation. And you are removing barriers for people to become more a part of the community, and I deeply appreciate it. And creating these safe spaces where we can have these conversations is something that's needed over and over again. And I think I really appreciate, Mohsen creating that. So thank you so much.
Jazakallahu khairan. Jazakallahu khairan, everyone. Yes, we will be having more webinars in the future. And again, you have Sister Amber's contact. Inshallah, we will be sharing the recording. And thank you to all of you for being allies and taking time to partake and listen. And Jazakallahu khairan, and have a wonderful evening.
Jazakumullah khair, everyone.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care.